as reported Thursday morning by numerous boxing outlets. Boxing great and three-division world champion Vasyl Lomachenko retired from boxing. Though his 18-3 record doesn't look amazing on paper, he had an amazing career over 12 years from 2013 to present day. The Ukrainian leaves behind perhaps the most storied amateur career in boxing history, and along with current undisputed heavyweight champion Oleksandr Usyk represent the two best fighters in the history of the war-torn country. Here we chronicle his career from start to finish. Known for class and pedigree inside the ring, Vasyl Lomachenko exemplified a talent rarely seen in the sport of boxing. Similar to unorthodox talents like Ali, Hector Camacho, Roy Jones, and Manny Pacquiao, who all brought their own style and flair to the sport, Lomachenko's athleticism, training methods, and enthusiasm was every bit as important to his notoriety as his record and victories in the ring. Coached in his early days by his father Anatoly, he played hockey and participated in gymnastics before starting his storied amateur career, becoming a 2008 and 2012 gold medalist and finishing with an amazing 396-1 record. He then turned pro in 2013 under Bob Arum's Top Rank banner. Lomachenko made his professional debut in United States on October 12, 2013, as part of the undercard to Timothy Bradley versus Juan Manuel Marquez, defeating Mexican fighter Jose Ramirez with a fourth-round knockout. In what was an unprecedented move, he attempted to capture the WBO featherweight title against the tough and durable Orlando Salido in March of 2014. Failing to make the 126-pound weight limit, Salido came into the ring close to the welterweight limit of 147 pounds and attempted to use his extra weight to bully Lomachenko, who himself tried to contrast it with movement and angles. A late surge, which saw him injure Salido in the final round, was unable to change the final result, losing by split decision. Two judges had it for Salido 116-112 and 115-113, while the third had it for Lomachenko 115-113. Lomachenko, for his part, stated he felt the decision was fair and accepted blame for not following through with his corner's game plan, promising to learn from experience and come back stronger. Not one to take a step back in his career, Lomachenko immediately signed on to challenge for the same title against the slick Gary Russell Jr. Russell was 24-0 at the time, and many expected a second straight loss for Lomachenko, believing that he was getting in over his head in his third pro fight. In a role reversal, Loma was on the front foot more and hurt Russell late in the fight en route to a majority decision victory. With this victory, Lomachenko joined Sainsak Muangsharin as the only other boxer to have won a world title in the quickest amount of time since turning professional, accomplishing the feat in just his third professional bout. It was this fight that began his professional ascent to pound-for-pound status. Keeping his foot on the gas, he defended first title defense against mandatory challenger Konlatarn Piripinho of Thailand. This fight took place on the undercard of Manny Pacquiao vs. Chris Algieri on HBO pay-per-view bout on November 22, 2014, at the Cotai Arena, Venetian Resort in Macau. Although Piripinho's record of 52 wins and 1 loss made the fight sound challenging for Lomachenko, the only time he stepped up in his 11-year career was in 2012 against the underrated Chris John, which he lost via unanimous decision, easily winning a unanimous decision by 3 scores of 120-107. Lomachenko then made 2 more defenses at featherweight prior to moving up to lightweight to challenge in what would become his first great knockout victory, and still stands out on his highlight reel. In what was seen at the time as perhaps the most dangerous fight of his career, Loma was next slated to take on big punching challenger Nicholas Walters. Known as the Axeman, Walters had a devastating left hook and had just scored the biggest victory of his career against the popular Nonito Donaire. But Lomachenko handled the affair beautifully, dominating the first 6 rounds once again with movement and angles, frustrating Walters enough to quit on his stool. Walters was never the same again and only fought 4 more times in his career before retiring. He followed this performance with a similar dominant effort against another former standout Olympian, Guillermo Rigondeaux. On August 21st, Aram stated the Lomachenko and Rigondeaux camps were closing in on finalizing a deal for December 9th. A fight with the two-weight world champion and reigning super bantamweight title holder, a two-time Olympic gold medalist, and one of the most successful amateur boxers ever, would take place at 130 pounds. Lomachenko would take some criticism for perhaps the first time in his career, as some had issues with Rigondeaux moving up two weight classes to challenge Loma. In front of a sellout crowd of 5,102 at the theater, Lomachenko retained his WBO title, dominating the fight with superior boxing skills, forcing Rigondeaux to retire on his stool after round 6. Rigondeaux stated he had broken the top of his left hand in round 2, which was the reason he did not come out for round 7. He became Lomachenko's 4th consecutive opponent to retire on his stool. The loss also marked the first time Rigondeaux had lost since 2003, when he was still an amateur. At the time of stoppage, Lomachenko was ahead on all 3 judges' scorecards, 60-53, and 2 scores of 59-54. This, along with the Walters fight and victories in between against Jason Sosa and Miguel Mariaga, represented 4 consecutive victories by his opponents retiring in their corners, and reputation of Loma's skills being so perplexing and confusing that it leads to submission led to him being called the Matrix. With the next goal set on becoming a 3-division world champion in only 12 fights, he challenged the talented Jorge Linares at lightweight. In front of 10,429 in attendance, Lomachenko survived a knockdown in round 6 to win via TKO in round 10 after a perfectly placed liver shot to claim the WBA Super and the Ring lightweight titles. He showed tenacity and grit against a naturally bigger opponent and further solidified his status as an elite pound-for-pounder. He defended 3 times with victories against Jose Pedraza, Anthony Crowla, and Luke Campbell before being challenged by the upstart Teofimo Lopez. Lopez was coming off his signature second-round knockout victory over the tough Richard Comey. A 3-1 underdog still, Lopez controlled the early action behind a jab and threat of his power to the head, combined with body shots, to slow Loma down en route to landing at over a 50% clip, winning a surprisingly clear unanimous decision. Though one scorecard of 119-109 was met with some criticism, a rematch was never seriously discussed, and Lomachenko had suffered the first clear-cut loss of his career, using 2021 as a comeback year to try to attempt to rebuild to a return title shot against Lopez, defeating Masayoshi Nakatani in June by a 9th-round knockout, and a dominant decision victory over Richard Comey in December re-solidified him as a top contender in the division, with former Loma conqueror Teofimo Lopez suffering an upset loss of the unified titles at the hands of Australian challenger George Kambosos Jr. Still one of the most marketable fighters in the sport, a challenger of the new champion was discussed. But on February 24th, 2022, Russia launched an invasion of Ukraine, and Lomachenko returned to his home country to aid in the war effort. On March 20th, Lomachenko was given permission to leave Ukraine in order to face George Kambosos Jr. in Australia. However, he declined, opting to stay and fight for his country. Kambosos Jr. instead lost his titles to WBC champion Devin Haney, who twice dominated him to become the undisputed lightweight champion. In March of 2023, he and Haney finalized negotiations for a May fight at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas. For the first time, he was an underdog going into the fight, as Haney looked fantastic in his 2 decisive victories over Kambosos, with both being on Kambosos' home turf in Australia. In a closely contested fight, Haney utilized a similar formula as the one employed by Lopez by walking down Lomachenko behind a solid jab and body punching. Later in the 10th and 11th rounds, Lomachenko began closing the gap with his trademark angles and footwork, creating openings and giving him his best 2 rounds of the contest. Ultimately, it was not enough, with Haney winning a unanimous nod by scores of 116-112 and 2 scores of 115-113. However, the decision was greatly disputed, as many onlookers felt Lomachenko had done enough to win, including fellow boxers Shakur Stevenson and Jorge Linares, who had previously predicted a Haney victory. Others argued that as the fight had been close, a narrow result for Haney was not unreasonable. CompuBox Punch stats suggested Lomachenko had landed 124 of 564 punches thrown, a 22% clip, while Haney landed 110 of 405 for 27%, with both boxers outlanding the other in 5 rounds each, the other 2 rounds being even. In the aftermath of Haney's victory, Lomachenko initially said he'd file an appeal, believing he'd won the fight, while Haney praised Lomachenko's talent, calling him his toughest opponent. Overall, it was a nip-and-tuck fight that entertained fans despite Loma falling short. In what would be the final fight of his career, on May 12, 2024 in Perth, Australia, Lomachenko was scheduled to fight former unified lightweight champion George Kambosos Jr. for the vacant IBF lightweight title. In one of his most dominant performances of recent years, Lomachenko won the fight by TKO in the 11th round, dropping Kambosos once with body shots before downing him again soon after with a continued body attack, after which the referee stopped the fight. Though talks were initiated for a Gervonta Tank Davis fight, no terms were ultimately met, citing a lack of motivation to continue due to a content family life with his wife and 2 children, along with a commitment to tend to his country along with his countrymen, including the Klitschko brothers and heavyweight champion Oleksandr Usyk. Lomachenko has made his family, friends, fans, and country all proud, and undoubtedly the next stop should easily be the International Boxing Hall of Fame, where the combination of an outstanding amateur and professional career as a 3-division world champion will perhaps only be overshadowed by his character and work ethic outside of the ropes, where it matters most.